What's going on, people? Welcome to United View and welcome to the Tactical View with me and Cam after our masterclass against Nottingham Forest. Yes, it's Nottingham Forest. Yes, they're not very good. Yes, they give you a lot of chances, But we want to wax lyrical about our own team and find out why, even if they do allow you to play like that, we still have to have the tactical nous. We have to have the intelligence, the routines, the patterns to implement. And that's what we did to a T. There was a lot of good standout performers yesterday. Let's get into it, man. What we got?
Yeah, it was a brilliant performance. And we can't forget that only a few years ago, we were stressing every single game we come up against opposition like this because we couldn't break them down. Whatever they do, especially away from home, we just couldn't break down deep block teams, or, well, I guess they're not really deep block, but teams that set up with, I guess, a back five, lots of players trying to defend. We couldn't do anything to get past them. But yesterday, we saw so much in the way of the stuff Erik ten Hag's done, the rotations, constant movement. We could play through the thirds very easily. And look, even David De Gea's breaking lines, finding ways to distribute, get us up the pitch. We had no issues at all breaking through them. And look, we'll start this show the same way we start every single show. We talk about the Forest team. In terms of what we were looking at going into the game, I think the thing that concerned me most was probably Brennan Johnson and AWB, just the legs that they've got, getting into the channels and causing
only threat they've got in it. We were that's going to be a problem if we don't handle transition.
Yeah, but it's this front three here. It's just that danger that they might have a little bit of ability to get in their channels, especially with Maguire and Lindelof rather than Martinez and Varane. But I'd say apart from the first 10-15 minutes when Maguire was pretty ropey, after that he did pretty well against AWB. And for the rest of the game, we were pretty good, I'd say. Obviously, they've got a lot of height in their team, so set pieces were a big threat, and I think we won't talk about that too much today, but it was a little bit of a concern how when they were overloaded in the 6-yard box, the number of balls in the 6-yard box that we didn't deal with. The only player really that we had that was able to deal with that was Harry Maguire in that team yesterday.
This is why you do need him for games like that.
And that's... Yeah. We can't forget that's why we signed him. Yeah. We signed him because of that trio at the time of centre-backs and goalkeeper. We needed somebody who could deal with those sorts of balls, and he was the guy.
Was it the same against Brentford as well, or the same against
Brentford? Didn't really get it right. But
no, was it Everton? I think it was Everton.
Might have been Everton,
played in a few games recently, Harry Maguire. And, you know, the thing that he is good at is that.
Yeah, that's why we signed him, because at that time we needed a centre-back who was dominant in the air, and he at the time was one of the best in the world and still is in terms of his aerial duels and dealing with that side of the game. In terms of the match stats, you can see how well we really did play. 68% possession, and again, it's no surprise that when we kept the ball well, Anthony and Sancho both started to play much better. They were important in terms of keeping the ball. Sancho didn't have his best game, but it was a bit easier for him when he wasn't having to run into large gaps, sort of get in behind, use his pace. He was able to just receive the ball in the final third and try to create things. Anthony was fantastic. In terms of XG, 3.49 XG, that is incredible. I mean, in general, you typically see that you tend to score more goals than your XG, and as Ten Hag spoke about after the game, we probably could have scored 4 or 5 in that game. Didn't concede too much XG either, which was fantastic. 22 shots, 8 on target. Forest didn't have a single shot on target. Yes, there are a few moments especially from the corners, where we thought they could have threatened, probably should have scored, but they didn't. And
no, exactly. And AWB, when Dalot lays it off for him, which that could have been, you know, if he was a better striker, that's an easy chance to hit the target, but he doesn't. So, you know, literally not a shot on target all game, and 22 shots, 8 on target for us shows the dominance. 70% possession, basically.
Exactly, a dominant performance from United, exactly what we want to see away from home, and a real mark of how far this team's come under Erik ten Hag. So what we'll look at now quickly is just how the teams match up in terms of formations, and that will give us a little bit of a guide as to what we're going to look at for the rest of the show. So, to start with, I'm not quite sure why the colours have switched over, but it is what it is.
It is what it is, yeah.
What we're going to see here, so in terms of the formations, obviously United in our usual 4-2-3-1, Forest in their 5-2-1-2, I guess you can call it. They've got the double pivot here of Freuler and Danilo. Gibbs-White as sort of a number 10, sometimes dropped into midfield, sometimes pushed up in the front three as well. AWB and Brennan Johnson as well. So obviously in these types of games where you're expected to have a lot of the ball, the important bit to get yourself into the final third, you've got to be able to play out of your own half easily. So we're going to hone in on what was going on really in this part of the pitch. So obviously, at the top end of the pitch, what we had was Sancho and Anthony pinning the back line as really as high and wide as they possibly could. And obviously, when you're playing against a weaker team, the wide centre-backs here aren't going to want to be in 1v1 battles with Sancho and Anthony. So what's going to happen then is Ranelodi's going to drop in to try and give McKenna some support. And you're going to see the same thing on this side with Nico Williams dropping in to give Felipe some support. So what that leaves you with, in the other half of the pitch with United playing out, is we've got our back four, we've got our midfield, either a 2 or maybe sometimes Bruno will drop in there as well, against Johnson, AWB, Gibbs-White, Danilo and Freuler. So we'll focus on what's happening in this part of the pitch next as a little bit of the matchup in terms of how we played out from the back in this game.
Yeah, because it was brilliant, the amount of times we got out, and I'm not even going to say beat their press, because they didn't press, but the the system in terms of how we shifted the ball and the patterns we had to consistently keep getting that was spot on.
Exactly that. So what we tended to see when we were playing out from the back is that the Forest strikers would be sort of on top of our centre-backs, opposite our centre-backs. In terms of how high they were positioned, they tried to be on the same height as our full-backs. And what we saw, which was really interesting, was we weren't trying to create, at least not all the time, trying to create that advantage in build-up with the extra man dropping in. We were actually using rotation so that we didn't have to drop an extra man in, which obviously means you can keep an extra man high up the pitch. So what we saw, for example, quite a lot of the time, was Dalot varying his positioning here. So what we would see, for example, is Maguire starting in this sort of area, Lindelof starting a little bit wider.
Yeah, I liked that. Remember my biggest concern when we looked a bit uncomfortable with the goal kicks against Brentford?
Yeah.
I don't think it happened as much against Everton, when Martinez obviously starts here, puts the ball straight down, and the ball was just going there, and it was inviting pressure from Tony, blocking it. We just looked really uncomfortable. I liked this style of goal kick, and I would like us to do that more often.
Well, the reason that we were doing that in this game was because if Lindelof starts here, it's very easy for the striker here to just stand still, or even just press in a straight manner. And if you do that, you run in a straight line there, you're blocking off that pass into midfield. Whereas, because of what we were trying to do, the way we were trying to do things, Gibbs-White tends to be man-oriented, so he was pretty much sitting on Casemiro or whoever happened to be our deepest midfielder in the moment. And the other midfielders there for Forest, Freuler and Danilo, were sitting on Bruno and Christian Eriksen.
Yeah, so they're marked in that.
So they're marked in that particular moment. So what we were trying to do was find a way to give Lindelof the option of either playing into midfield or playing out to whoever's in this area. So what we were seeing was, because Lindelof was a little bit wider, that means that if Johnson decides to stay where he is, he's not pressing anything, very easy for Lindelof to receive the ball and play wide. And if Johnson comes out wider here, Lindelof can either go back to De Gea, who can find Eriksen, or Lindelof himself can find that ball between the lines to Christian Eriksen.
Yep.
So the difference in positioning was because we wanted to manipulate Johnson here into a different position so that we could then play through the lines a little bit more easily.
But that was my annoying thing, because just by doing that, it literally, again, imagine that was Ivan Toney and that was Mbeumo. It's the same situation. And that's why I was saying in that moment, when we kept having Martinez there and Varane there, when it wasn't working, and I know Dave played a 5 at the back, Brentford, I get that, but all we had to do, just push them wider.
It was a little bit of a different situation though, because I think the Brentford wing-backs were more willing to jump on the full-back straight away, whereas in this situation, either Eriksen or Dalot was almost always free. Yeah, because the Forest full-backs weren't as willing to jump, which means that one of these two was always free. It tended to be Lodi jumping if one of them was going to, which means that there's always going to be one free, so you don't necessarily get the advantage there. You're better off with Lindelof out wider. So what we were tending to see with that happening was either Eriksen would start higher in this area to create that space there to drop into, or quite often we'd see Dalot starting in field. So when Dalot started in field there, Freuler would start here, and as soon as that ball got played by De Gea out to Lindelof or out to Maguire, Freuler would realise, hang on, there's someone else in midfield, so I'll jump on top of him, and then Lindelof gets that ball there, Johnson goes to press him, but Eriksen's very easily able to drop into that space there to receive nice and easily, or that passing lane is open there to Jadon Sancho instead. So it was those rotations that we were seeing, meaning that if Freuler, for example, decides that he's going to stick with Eriksen when he goes wide, Lindelof can very easily, when he receives that ball, play into midfield or play it back to De Gea, who can then play into midfield. So it was a nice way of sort of changing the positions of the players. We've still got somebody in the centre-back position, somebody in the full-back position, somebody in midfield, but it's the fluidity in there. So it's a positional structure because we've got players in those positions, but what's changing is the players and the positioning. So sometimes it's Dalot, sometimes it's Eriksen, sometimes it's Bruno, and that's what one of the hallmarks of a great system is that, yes, you've got the structure, but there's a lot of variability and fluidity in terms of where the players are and how they decide to execute it at that moment. And sometimes as well, what we'd even see is if the ball went out to Maguire, for example, Lindelof would actually go on into the next line there.
Yeah, he went into there loads of times,
And Dalot would stay wide, then possibly come inside there. So then he's in that position that Lindelof was in. Lindelof's into midfield, Eriksen's in this area here. So there's always somebody free.
Like you said, the rotation and the amount of options that are available and the different variations of playing out from that, it did help that Forest are not a proactive team. They wasn't trying to rush us. They wasn't trying to hunt us down. They actually made it very easy for us. But like you said, in games gone by, in seasons gone by, we're clueless in that sort of situation because the method and the system isn't there. So I get it. We can't get too excited. This isn't Real Madrid away.
Yeah, exactly.
However, you still have to big up what we're seeing because it's deliberate and it's been worked on. And that's what we've been screaming out for. Remember, one of our objectives, it feels like ages ago we were talking about it. One of our main objectives this season was to implement a style of play, was to implement patterns, was to implement rules, was to implement organisation, and something that we can identify with and go, that's what we always do, or that's how we always want to play.
You can see that the players understand the system, understand the structure. Look at this clip, for example. When we start here, Dalot takes the throw in, but you can see Lindelof and Maguire are telling Dalot where he goes, and at this point, he's sprinting infield. You look at what that does to Awani there in terms of his positioning. You can see that he's having to run infield to follow Dalot as well. And obviously the implication of that, what that's going to do with Dalot going inside there, is that opens the channel out wide for Christian Eriksen to drop in and receive. Not quite sure what's saving there, but anyway. Dalot tucks into midfield. The Forest player's got to follow him there to block that passing lane from Lindelof to Dalot. And what that will then do as the clip wears on is you'll see it will open the passing lane for Christian Eriksen. If you look again, you can see we've got Morgan Gibbs-White there on top of Casemiro, our deepest midfielder in that moment. So Dalot is now free in that specific moment with Brendan Johnson following him all the way in there. So as that ball goes to Maguire, what you see is then Maguire then moves that back across to Victor Lindelof. Look at the man orientation here. We've managed to draw Remo Freuler out from midfield there. So he is now on top of Dalot.
Yeah, which he doesn't really want to have to do that.
Exactly, but that's their double pivot there. They're occupied with our men. So we've got Eriksen free down the opposite side in the channel. So what we can see there, as Lindelof receives the ball, you can see Maguire's telling him at this point, as we roll it on, Holland, De Gea gives that ball. Lindelof pushes on onto the next line there. You can see De Gea now moves that ball out to Diogo Dalot. And you can see, as Dalot turns his body inwards, you can see that's a trigger for the Forest players to press.
Yeah.
Him turning his body inwards there.
You think, right, we've got him going back to his own
and you
goal.
see a fullback on the wrong side. So he's going in there. He's thinking about coming into here. He's thinking about coming into there. They're sort of getting to their men first, then they're going to try and squeeze as soon as that's happened, because Dalot's triggered that press there.
Yeah.
That's another thing that Erik ten Hag wants to do. He's triggered the press,
bait them
suck them in one side, and you can see what happens. Look, Lindelof again rotates into midfield, and now he's marked by Morgan Gibbs-White, I think, at that moment. And as Lindelof receives here, look, the Forest players are starting to squeeze. The ball goes back to Maguire, and look, as Maguire's telling Dalot there, use Aaron Wan-Bissaka. But what I really like here is because you can see how many Forest players are up in this area. You've got 5 Forest players in that circle there. You've got all those 5 there in that area. So what that means is there's going to be space elsewhere on the pitch. And because of that, you can see Dalot doesn't just blindly play the ball to Aaron Wan-Bissaka. What he spotted is out of the picture, you've got Renan Lodi making a sprint to go and jump on Wan-Bissaka because he sees what's happening. So it doesn't work out in this instance, but Dalot actually notices, look, Lodi's just going straight up there to press Wan-Bissaka, so there's going to be a 1v1 there for Anthony. So I really like the way that Dalot was able to think on his feet. He's seen the situation, and what that is because he understands the rules and principles of what Ten Hag's trying to achieve. He understands you want to suck them in, create the overload, or sort of draw them into one area, create some space elsewhere. He's got that sort of so well understood that he's able to think on his feet, and you've got to have the system in place first so that the players are so comfortable with it they can then think beyond that.
And he's doing this on the opposite side as well. You know, ideally, Erik ten Hag wants him to be in his rightful position, whether it's Wan-Bissaka or him, doing that from the other side.
Exactly.
You know, but he's shown good adaptability to come in left back, no problem. I can do it from this side.
Exactly. It's fantastic how he's able to sort of think on his feet, he's able to adapt, and he's able to, I think being on the other side helps him because he's able to cut in and play that ball much more easily.
Yeah.
If we now look at the second clip here, let's look at the second clip. So what I think is brilliant about here, look, you can see, as we talked about earlier, Lindelof starts a bit wider, which causes Awani a bit of a problem.
Yeah, he doesn't know which one to do.
Yeah, he's not on the corner of the 6-yard box. He's much wider than he normally is. Obviously, that gives him the option inside and the option outside because he's positioned halfway between both of those. And it changes, obviously, the distance and the angles for Awani in terms of his press. Yeah. And what you see, as we start that clip, look, Maguire's saying possibly we can use Aaron Wan-Bissaka there, rolls that ball out to Lindelof, and as that ball gets rolled out to Lindelof, you can see Dalot started inside in the pivot this time. He runs wide. Look how the pressing player follows him. So in this instance, it's the opposite of what happened earlier, where the pressing player starts inside. The pressing player now is following Dalot, and what that's going to
make sure he can't get it. He's like, no, you're not going there, Dalot.
Exactly, because he started there, and what that's going to open up is this big space for Eriksen inside in the centre to receive the ball. De Gea plays a great ball between the lines.
On his weaker foot.
Exactly, fantastic from De Gea, brilliant from Eriksen, round the corner first time, and we're straight out of the press. It's fantastic. It's a little bit of rotation there. You saw Dalot starting inside in the pivot, coming out to the fullback position, Eriksen then dropping in. It's the rotation that makes you get through the press easily because what it's doing is Forest are man-oriented. The pivot there, Freuler in particular, locks onto whoever started in that position. If they then go, Freuler follows them, opens that space. So that's something that the coaching staff would have looked at in advance, seen and identified, and it's worked in terms of how easily we're able to play through. And look, within 3 or 4 passes, we're in the opposition box. That is exactly what you want to see against these sorts of teams, where we've looked at how they defend, we've looked at their structure, and we have systematically dismantled them in just a few passes. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, it really was good. And it wasn't like a bit of luck where we did it once or twice. It was a consistent theme through the game. And like I said, I know it's Forest. There could be people sitting at home saying, guys, calm down. Yeah, relegation fodder. They haven't won in 6 now, etc., etc. However, let's not forget where we're coming from. I think we can get lost sometimes in what we want to achieve this season and getting more trophies and stuff like that. But when you strip it back down to basics of where we were coming from versus where we wanted to get to this season, we wanted to see this. You know, we were saying, let's just finish 5th with a style of play.
Yeah.
We wanted to see this, but even if we finish 5th. I'm not saying everyone thought that, and that's okay, but with how bad, which seems like light years ago last year when we went, got to sell like 10 players. What are we going to do? Open heart surgery? Oh my God. This is kind of an open heart surgery because it's completely different, but at the same time, this is Lindelof. This is Maguire.
Yeah,
this
same
is
players.
Dalot. This is Wan-Bissaka.
Even Wan-Bissaka.
These are the same players.
Yeah, it is.
So that just proves when you get the right manager in, you still can get a tune. Yes, you need to. We know they haven't been our main 2, so even the manager's come in and gone, right, yeah. But I can still get a tune out of them. Wan-Bissaka has been unbelievable. I know
we'll talk about his role now.
Jeez.
So what we've just covered there is how we played out from the back, how we got the ball through our own sort of third, into the middle third and into the final third of the pitch. What happened in the attacking half is what we'll come on to now. So what we saw was typically something a little bit like this in terms of the way we were set up. And as we mentioned at the start, what we usually saw was Anthony and Sancho really high and wide, trying to pin back the Forest back 5. So what that does, obviously, is we've got 3 players there, our front 3 pinning back that back 5. That means we'll have an overload somewhere else on the pitch because we've only got 3v5 up there. And what that meant was that there's a lot of space in these wide areas, there's a lot of space in midfield as well, and there's space really all over the pitch. And what you see here, if you split the pitch into these 5 lanes, which is the way that I think a lot of top managers view the pitch, where they break it down into these 5 lanes, and they try to get the right number of players in each zone. That's the way they see it. And what we saw was obviously you got the front 3 there pinning them back, but in midfield, what we tried to do, because Forest were going sort of man for man with their 2 strikers on Maguire and Lindelof, what that leaves is for the midfield there, for the 3 here in midfield of Forest, what it means is that if Bruno goes up there, you can still, by inverting the fullbacks, have a 4v3 overload. So what we're leaving ourselves with in situations like this, where sometimes Eriksen would drop in between to sort of make things a little bit easier to connect the dots, but we would always have at the very least a 3v3, if not a 4v3 if Bruno drops in, or if Eriksen comes up here, but we'd always have the ability to not just retain possession in this back line here, but we'd always have a great zone here where we can move the ball forward and we can play from inside to out, and with right rotation, with the right technical skill, you can see Wan-Bissaka's body shape. A lot of the time, he was on the half turn ready to play forward. The same with Dalot. They were prepared to drive forwards from midfield. And what you typically see was Gibbs White, if Eriksen did drop in, would come on to the deepest midfielder here. And these guys weren't scared, because it's a 3v2 in this situation here. They know there's enough cover if we do lose the ball. They weren't scared to go and make runs in behind. So what we saw was, in terms of the 3-2-5 that we often see, you could sort of think of it as, let's say in this situation, Dalot pushes on there into the half space there. You've got Bruno in the half space there. You've got the back 3 there. You've got your double pivot here, whether it's formed of Casemiro, Eriksen, the fullbacks, anyone really. Sometimes Bruno drops in, but you've still got that front 5. You've got Sancho and Anthony pinning that back 5 back. And then because of that, you've got enough players here to keep the double pivot distracted. So Fernandes and Eriksen, or Fernandes and Dalot, they were getting so much time in the slightly wider areas, sort of Bruno in particular, and the sort of De Bruyne-esque areas into the sort of the inside right channel to dictate, get on the ball, do whatever he wanted to do. And what this does here as well, obviously we've got the 3v2 here in terms of, so we've got 3 there, line of 2. It gives us the advantage against the Forest pivot with the help of one of these guys dropping off. It makes it so easy for us to retain the ball and play forward. Yeah. So we'll look at some clips now of sort of how that worked in practice. And we'll come on to this first one here. So what we've got here is, as Anthony receives the ball, you can see, look at this first picture, you've got Sancho holding the width on that side. Again, Anthony holding the width here. Notice he's not right on the touchline, a little bit narrower. And this is probably the widest, one of the widest we were all game. It's obviously on that previous screen, we looked at it as if it was touchlines. That's just for exaggeration, just to make it easier to see. In reality, in the game, minimum width, it is a little bit narrower. It's as narrow as you can possibly get away with while still having enough space to express yourselves. So what we see in this clip here is, as we roll it on very slightly, you can see in this moment here, you've got a midfield 4, really. So you've got Wan-Bissaka stepping in there. You've got Eriksen.
Look at Wamby! What's he doing there?
You would have never seen that in previous seasons, would you?
Mate.
You don't see that in previous seasons, but you've got Casemiro, Wan-Bissaka, Eriksen and Bruno there. You've got Sancho, Martial and Antony pinning the defence, and because of that, you've got the overload there. So you've got the sort of the Forest 3 midfielders there. He's worried mostly about
there, isn't it? Yeah.
Wan-Bissaka, yeah. But we've got enough players in that midfield that there's always somebody free. In this case, it's Dalot. He's in acres of space. If we can get the ball to him, we're in a good position. So it's nice to see sort of the structure opening up there. Sancho holding the width that side. Look, that's forcing Nico Williams back. Look, the other thing, that's what I love about this. From that base, he's in the pivot to start with Wan-Bissaka there. And it's that ability he's got now to recognise the space. He sees when Antony gets the ball, this is the other thing I love, is the dynamics that we've got between the team. Everybody recognises when the winger has got the ball, because they're inverted, they're trying to cut in, you've got to get that timing of run right, so that as Antony looks to cut in, as Renan Lodi engages, when he's in that position where he's fully focused on Antony, that's the exact moment where we need somebody running in that inside channel so that he's got to back off. And look what happens. As Wan-Bissaka makes that run, the midfielder lets him go. Obviously, it ends up going out of play on this occasion. We'll see it better in the next clip, actually, with the underlapping run. Yeah. But it's the way that it distracts the wing back, so he has to worry about what's inside, gives Antony the space to cut in. And also, because the midfielder's tracked him all the way, we'll just go back to the end of this. Because the midfielder tracks Wan-Bissaka all the way, what happens towards the end is that there's actually a lot of space for Antony to cut in, because the midfielder's going with him all the way.
If he gets past him there, because he went for his little quick feet to get round.
Exactly.
And if he does, then, he's in.
Spot on, exactly. So we'll come on to the next clip now, and what we can see, this is a little bit more in the way of the attacking sort of shape. So you see Wan-Bissaka doing some...
Look at Wamby. Look at him sitting there just dictating like Essien.
It's mad, isn't it? It is mad.
He's not doing that.
It's mad what's going on.
It's mad that he's here. It's crazy.
It is. And you can see again, you've got Sancho holding the width. Nico Williams is pinned back. You've got the back five pinned back. Renan Lodi's getting back into position there. Again, that's a great sign. Yeah. You've got the Forest midfield in this area really narrow. And we've got the overload again. You've got Eriksen free. You've got Martial free. You've got Sancho free. Dalot free. We've got so many free players there. Wan-Bissaka moves it back to Eriksen. What I really like here in this situation, obviously Martial's dropped in. Eriksen's nice and composed. Finds that ball out to Antony there. And look again, this time it's Casemiro. Yeah. And again, it's the fluidity. Sometimes it's Wan-Bissaka who's underlapping. Sometimes it's Casemiro. The players understand that wherever you are...
decoy runs. He's not trying to get the ball there. It's only to take the player out.
He's an option though.
And even if you wanted to play it into that area to get further, you can. Yeah. But actually, the most effective part of it is to take the men away to create that space.
It is, but what I like is that this was the position Wan-Bissaka was in previously. The right of the pivot, he made that run. Yeah. Now it's Casemiro. The players understand that it's not about your position in theory. It's not about, oh, I'm a centre-back, I'm a right winger, I'm this, I'm that, and whatever. It's about, if you're in this position on the pitch, this is what you do next, this is what we do. That's the rules and principles. Yeah. They understand not that you're a centre-back so you defend, or you're a keeper so you save shots,
if you're in that area
striker
at that
so
time,
you stay in the box. Any of that. Wherever you are at the time, you do the right thing for that job.
Where at Ten Hag said, we have to attack with 11 and defend with 11. This is actually what we're seeing.
This is what we're doing, yeah. So as you see again, and this is a better example of it, Casemiro drags the midfield player away.
As well. He doesn't want that ball.
Oh, but it's his timing. You can see as Lodi engages, he increases his pace to start sprinting. And look, he's taking the Forest player away. And what does that leave? It leaves a massive area of space there for not just Antony to cut in, but also Bruno to potentially receive the ball. So that area there is left by Casemiro taking the Forest player away, the midfield player away. And that means that Antony can then cut in. You've got to look as well. Lodi's completely engaged in that particular situation. He's fully focused 100% on Antony. And look, as Casemiro goes there, Lodi has a quick scan around as Antony starts to cut in. And he has to back off. He has to worry about Casemiro. So that, again, gives Antony that space to cut in. I think he gives it to Wan-Bissaka in this situation. And Wan-Bissaka's receiving the ball, able to play forward, find Bruno, find Casemiro again. And what I really like as well is Casemiro hasn't just panicked and gone back to his position.
That's a great
He stayed on the right wing. He stayed there in that position, holding the width. Again, we've got that combination. We've got the 2v2 out wide, and we're able to produce a good ball into the box and get that ball to Anthony Martial.
Yeah, it is top stuff.
I think the last thing I wanted to talk about then is back onto here in terms of, we've talked about sort of the structure in the middle third and how we tried to retain the ball. And then the final thing to really mention in terms of what we did to actually break Forest down, the last bit, that cutting edge, is what we always had the overload. So it was maybe Bruno's in the half space to start with here. Whoever's right of the pivot here, if it's Casemiro and Wan-Bissaka in this particular moment, Wan-Bissaka, as Antony receives that ball, he's on the touchline, ready to cut in. Lodi goes out to him. As Lodi scans round, he's always making that run. And if he doesn't get that ball, his recovery run after that is brilliant. As Antony cuts in, Wan-Bissaka will then come right out to the wing, so there's still that option there. There's always that 3 men. So even if the pivot player gets drawn in, we've got a 3v3. We've got the right numbers, so that if we use the moments right, we keep dynamic, keep moving the ball around, we're able to break our way through there with a little bit of combination play and find the ball into the box, which is fantastic. We see that either side. I think you can really see that in some of the stats here. So what we'll look at here is the play areas, and you can see wide combinations is what we focus on. Look how much went through that right wing. That is because of Anthony being brilliant.
Exactly.
But it's because
really
we've got that combination play. And yes, we had the overload in the middle of the pitch, but we used that then to create space in the wide areas to overload. So that's how it worked. Obviously, in terms of us being camped in their half, that supports it as well. The other thing I quite like was the dribbles percentage as well. So when you're doing that sort of thing, to be able to camp in Forest's half and be able to sustain your attacks and be patient, have more and more chances at it, you've got to keep the ball. So when you are making your dribbles, you are carrying the ball, you've got to keep it. You can't lose it. Our dribble success percentage was pretty good, 53%, 10 out of 19 completed. So we are keeping the ball in those situations. In contrast to Forest, 22%, only 2 out of 9 completed, and that means that we're able to turn the ball over quickly. They weren't able to get any foothold in the game because of that.
We did see that consistently as well.
Exactly.
It wasn't fluke. That's what I loved most about yesterday. This was the potential to be quite a tricky game. It really was. And we bringing in Lindelof and Maguire against Awoniyi and Brennan Johnson as well. You're thinking, just handle the transitions because we could be in big trouble. But Lindelof was absolutely flawless.
Lindelof was unbelievable. Look, this final clip I think encapsulates everything United did well in this game. So we start with Maguire here on the ball. That goes out to Anthony. And look, in this situation, you've got Bruno there. He's telling Wan-Bissaka, get out, get down the line.
There.
Because Anthony's cut in this situation. So we know one of the rules and principles, we need somebody stretching the width, somebody pinning the defence. He's telling Wan-Bissaka, go there.
Yeah.
Forest midfield player here is worried about Anthony, so we're going to have somebody free on the far side. That's Diogo Dalot.
Who else is telling him as well?
Yeah, Casemiro, everybody.
Casemiro say, you know what we do, this is the trigger, off you go.
Exactly, everybody understands, but he's on his bike already. Everybody understands. Yeah. And look, Dalot there will become really important.
Waiting for
He'll become important later in this move because he's the one that's free at this specific moment. Again, you've got Sancho pinning the defence. You've got, who's that at that moment? That's Weghorst, isn't it? Yeah, I've forgotten he'd come off at this point. But yeah, you've got Anthony there on the ball. He plays it back to Eriksen. What I really like here is as Eriksen plays it to Lindelof, look at Gibbs-White here. So watch Gibbs-White's movement. So Eriksen is really clever with what he does next. So Gibbs-White obviously already is trying to go close down Eriksen. Obviously the Forest at this point have settled into a front 3 versus R3. So it could be a little bit of danger. Yeah. They are obviously man for man in that situation. But as Eriksen drops that ball off, watch what happens next. He sprints, well not sprints, but he drops back as deep as he possibly can. So Gibbs-White keeps going forward. And what that does is as Gibbs-White keeps going forward because of Eriksen's positioning.
Yeah, because he could just stay there and say, give it back to me, give it back to me.
He could have stayed there.
He's actually going there to also create a passing lane. If he'd get in a bit of trouble, I am here and I can go that way as well.
Exactly. He creates the angle for Lindelof to potentially pass it back to him. But also, what he does is by drawing Gibbs-White forward, he opens that angle so Lindelof can cut in and find that ball through there. So that's what I really like about this move. We created a sort of a V shape there to try and suck the Forest players in, and that allows Lindelof to find that ball through to Casemiro, sets it off to Dalot. How many times did we see that? We saw it in the first clip.
Round the corner.
Eriksen set it to Casemiro. It's exactly what we want to see. Casemiro fires it through to Bruno in this situation. Bruno gives it to Anthony. Anthony, because we're man for man in this situation, we've created that 3v3 situation. Anthony's able to drive inside. You've got Wan-Bissaka out there, so
and that's a good run. That's obviously it's Weghorst, so he probably thinks, my chances. But actually, I was saying to KG, because KG was saying, he didn't trust Weghorst there, and Weghorst throws his arms up because he wants it. But actually, whether you get it or you don't, it's very important you make that run as a forward. Don't be static, because if you stand there, give me it, I'm a bit nervous, I don't know. Make the run across there, because again, is that Lod? No, that's not Lod, I can't remember his name. He knows that someone's there, so he's been distracted. And the same with this defender here. He can see, shit, I've got a problem here. I've got to go. And that is where Dalot comes in.
This is the situation we've created. We're man for man on the right. So we've got 3v3, Bruno, Anthony and Wan-Bissaka versus Lodi, McKenna and Felipe. And what we've got is, so the situation is here. Lodi's got to worry about Wan-Bissaka, so he's a bit wider. McKenna's trying to follow Anthony. Bruno's there, occupying some space as well. Weghorst drags the man across. And in this situation here, Anthony is perfectly able.
Yeah, he's done well to
Dalot being free, didn't have a man on him, so he's not worried about the rest defence. Yeah. He makes that forward run in perfect time, and it's fantastic.
It's perfection.
That's exactly what you want to see. That's everything right with Erik ten Hag's Manchester United right now. Another fantastic performance using rotations, using the right structure. And again, the most important thing, you can see the rules and principles, you can see the fluidity. And this is why we've swept away so many of the teams that are lower in the league. And this is why we are where we are. Our record against the biggest teams isn't great right now, especially away from home. That will come next season. But for now, the important bit to build any title winning or potential title charge off is you get the points against the teams that are lower down in the league. And because of Erik ten Hag's brilliance, that is exactly what we're doing for now.
Yes, there you go, guys. Rolling on to Thursday. Obviously, there isn't going to be any Bruno being available. We'll see how we deal with that. Hopefully, Sabitzer can play because we're going to need him. But we're going to have a great system in play there because that is going to be an awfully, really tough game, a proper tough game. 2 massive games. Could be out of 2 competitions in the space of a week, or we could be through to the next round of 2 competitions and fighting on all fronts.
We could be through to a semi-final and a final.
Exactly, it could be absolutely unbelievable. So here's a big week. These are what we want. Yes, thank you for watching. Smash a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is your tactical view. We're out of it. See you same time, same place next week. Peace.